As somebody who grew up watching Revista de la Liga as a kid and absorbing as much Spanish football as I could, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome Guillem Balague onto the podcast. Guillem, we have spoken a number of times during my time at university, and whenever you had come in for a guest lecture, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I'm very grateful for you to take in the time to speak with me directly today. How are things?
I'm all right, Max, and it's nice to see you again. You mentioned Revista de la Liga, so let me start asking you, tell me a little bit what it was that caught everybody's imagination, because I know it's a long time away now, but everyone that I meet of your generation, they all mention, Revista de la Liga, that was brilliant. It just opened up my mind about football. What was it? What was it that we gave you?
It was obviously the insight into Spanish football, because to me, and I want to talk a little bit about this later on, obviously, as I mentioned to you off camera, I'm a long-suffering Evertonian, but the team that made me fall in love with football was Frank Rijkaard's Barcelona. And still to this day, I am the biggest Ronaldinho fan that you can meet. Like, Ronaldinho will always be my favorite player ever. So any opportunity to watch him work his magic was brilliant. And I think in regard to Revista, like, especially for me, as I've got aspirations of working in broadcast, like sports broadcasting, I think everything about the program was just fascinating. From the intro, which just got you glued to your TV screen, to the sort of relationship between you guys, and it was, it wasn't too serious. It was informal. You could talk, and as I said, to me at that time, I know, like, I'd say the 2010s was like the era of Spanish dominance, but for me at that time, that was when Spanish football was at its best.
Mm-hmm. Good to hear. Good to hear. It was done with a lot of love, and I know we weren't supposed to start with this, but I can tell you the best editorial meetings I've ever had were the ones on Monday morning before Revista, which lasted about an hour and a half for an hour show. And of course, already there was a lot of hours being put in to make sure that we got everything that we wanted in the show. So the fights took place in the editorial meeting, and then we just transmitted that into the show, and it's certainly some of the best work I've done, no doubt. So I'm glad that is missed. I miss it too.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Now, to kick off the podcast, you have authored books on some of the most influential names in world football, and I would like to dedicate some time to your most recent book, named Maradona, the Boy, the Rebel, the God, which is a wonderful, wonderful name to depict an icon, an iconic man that transcended the sport that he played. And through the book, I learned an awful lot of things that I didn't know about Diego, like the failed move to Sheffield United, how he felt like quitting the game at 21 during the Boca World Tour, and even the admiration he felt for his father, and the grief that he felt when he lost his father. As someone, I lost my dad last year, so that was really poignant to me and was very touching. For you, researching the book and writing the book, was there anything in particular that you hope to learn about Diego throughout the process?
It's not a question I asked myself at the beginning. It's certainly a journey that starts with pre-assumed ideas. I just think I'm going to find this, and that, but always trying to challenge in what most people think of it. And I found that very earlier on. I thought that Diego was, of course, an extraordinary player, an extraordinary personality, somebody, as you say, that transcended the game. But I wanted to know why he transcended the game, and I wanted to know in which ways and what was the process that took him to be a god in the eyes of many. Not so much to be a god, but to be a god in the eyes of many. So the title defines what I found. Somebody that always missed and had melancholy about that period as a kid when he was in Villa Fiorito and when he was with the Cebollitas team. Even though he never went back to it, he always dreamt of going back to that era. Basically, that suggests a man that is not happening in his own skin and in his own circumstances, but feels that there was a better time back then.
Yeah.
So that was the boy that he carried from the beginning until the end. The rebel, he obviously having come from an era of an area in which they don't exist. People in Villafiorito, they don't exist, and in the many villas that are around Buenos Aires. When he starts gathering influence and becoming a power itself, he used it for his own benefit, but in good causes as well. So he became authority, but he became a rebellious authority that told us, for instance, that UEFA and FIFA were corrupt, and we thought he was crazy. How could they be? And in fact, it was absolutely spot on. And then it was later on that we found out he was the first of so many things, but this was one. And God, it's a way of telling the reader that I'm about to tell the context of the Armando Maradona, which he was. Sometimes perhaps he felt like a god, but what I'm trying to get at is that he was enthroned as a god by Argentina and by others. Why is that? And then you have to find out about Argentina and why they have this need to find people that come from the country that have conquered the world, and then they put them, as I say, they convert them in gods. It's an absence that the country has, and I explored that as well. So, as you can see, and having read some of my books already, it is about Maradona, but it's also about it's a sociological approach, psychological approach, football approach to tell the story of one of the greatest.
Yeah, and it certainly is that an exploration of the relationships that Diego had, and as you mentioned, particularly during the the phase as a boy, there very much are two personas almost. There's Diego and there's Maradona, and there was a little piece in the book about Diego being the boy with his nose pressed up against the glass looking in. I really like that depiction of who he was as a boy. And obviously, as he developed and he got older and developed that sort of rebel and then godlike figure, that's where, the persona, the celebrity of Maradona comes out. Was that an intention, or was that something that revealed itself to you during the process of the book?
Very earlier on, you realize that you say two people, I think he was 100 different people. And it depended on the day, on who was with, on what moment of his life, on what drugs he had taken, on how close he was from his football success. He became so many things in one. Mm-hmm. But certainly, if you have to define it at the essence, there was and this was Fernando Signorini, his physical coach. Yet again, Maradona contract somebody to help him physically for individual training, and that was the first one in history who did that in football. Yeah. Well, Fernando Signorini was the man the first one to do that with him, and he told me, and it's a famous sentence that he uses everywhere, that with Diego he'll go to the end of the world. With Maradona, he doesn't want to be close to, and that duality you can see in everything that he does. But Diego belongs to that kid, that boy that was in Villafiorito, that had, as you said, a close relationship to his parents, the essence of him, or what Maradona thought it was his essence.
Yeah,
I think Maradona is also him. He needed the devotion. He needed to be on stage. He needed to be talked about. He needed to be felt almost like a godlike figure. So all that is him. We're all complex people anyway. If anybody did a biography of you, they will also find that you are more than one person. But in this case, it was all extremed because, of course, the drugs he took, but also because mass media used him as a character to fill space. And then, when that happens, you become almost like a caricature of yourself. They don't want the real you. They want the one that fills the pages. But let me go back to something you mentioned, and you talk about your dad. And in his case, Don Diego, his dad as well, was a figure that helped him stabilize. So it's a rocky ship, isn't it? His life with his mom and dad, it was a way of finding some stability, an anchor. There were anchors to him, so he wouldn't fall. But then, of course, when they both died, that was it. There was nothing to get hold of, and he didn't see, for instance, his former wife Claudia as an anchor. he saw as almost like as a copy of his mother, almost, and wanted her to be secondary and was not an anchor. It was under him. But his parents missing was something that really took him to the depths of depression, and more that we saw the consequences of at the end.
Yeah, definitely. And something that I picked on of what you said, and what I want to move into next, is you mentioned he was a man of many firsts. Signorini, you mentioned as his personal trainer. I believe he was one of the first sports stars to get an agent. And he was also one of the first footballers to get a press officer, I believe. Something that I found very interesting about Diego was his perception of the media. Of course, I knew he was heavily scrutinized by the media and held up as this symbolic figure, as you mentioned, both good and bad. But I was interested to learn about that trip he took to El Gráfico, an Argentinian sports magazine, when he was a young boy. I believe that was by Jorge Sitterspiller. Do you think this influenced his decision to create Maradona Productions? And could you tell us a little bit about that? Because as a media student, a footballer creating his own production company is absolutely fascinating to me.
And they're doing it now, aren't they? Especially the former players, but they are doing it now because they see themselves as brands. Well, the first one to see himself as a brand was Diego. Diego and Jorge Sitterspiller, who both came from the same kind of background, more or less. Sitterspiller came from a middle class family, but certainly was very close to him in the Cebolletas time. They both were 19, 20, 21-year-old boys that decided to go into Europe, to conquer Europe. And that was because they felt that they could do that, but they had big ideas that would allow them to conquer Europe. And partly down was that, and this was both Jorge and Diego working at this. The fact that they could see that Diego was becoming a very good player, that a lot of media were attracted to them. So they decided to control the message, to actually tell the story themselves, if possible. So why not create your own production company? It wasn't so much that they went to Gráfico and that was an eureka moment. In fact, the visit to Gráfico, that was Jorge Sitterspiller insisting to the most prestigious magazine in Latin America, really, in football, Gráfico, to see Maradona as a potential figure. It's the consequence of the bigger picture of Diego and Jorge, especially Jorge at that time, thinking, I'm just going to make this guy massive. And to do that, you have to attract the audience. And where is the audience? Well, it's in television. Well, let's film Maradona doing everything at home, training, in the car, and they managed to do in his time in Barcelona, but especially in his time in Napoli, about 500 hours of filming of his life. And Jorge went to United States and tried to sell it to networks, television network companies, and they just didn't buy it. They just didn't believe in it. There was no Netflix, there's no Apple TV, nothing like that. So they were ahead of the time. The Asif Kapadia documentary, which I'm sure you've seen and many have as well, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's a selection of those 500 hours of filming because they're still there. They're still available. If anybody wants to do another documentary, they can because there is so much in it. And that seems to me two people that had a vision for where everything was going, where football was going, where mass media was going. And let me jump a little bit from them manipulating the message and placing themselves as brand in the world of football to when mass media became that, it was universal, where it was appearing everywhere, where social media started also to make the first strides. Because I was at the point where, in search of big personalities, mass media went to Maradona and said, oh, it has to be him, one of those big personalities they would feed from. And that's what he had already retired by then. That's when he became God, because he was everywhere. He was one of the first huge personalities in mass media in Argentina anyway, and then in world media. And yeah, it was also kind of a first. He was brought into mass media to be the superstar that he dreamt of being, and so did Jorge Sistapilla 20 years earlier when they started with Maradona Productions.
Yeah, that is fascinating to hear. And you mentioned there how the footage significantly picked up during his time at Napoli in comparison to his time at Barcelona, because it is very, very strange to me how his time at Barcelona didn't go as well as people would have imagined. Like in Barcelona, to me, I'm 23. I look at Barcelona and they have always had a history of having world-class South American players. So to hear, like growing up and hearing that, it didn't really work out for Maradona at Barcelona was always shocking to me. And obviously you dive into that, into the book, and he's obviously horrifically injured and does his ankle in, which I don't think he ever really, recovered full sort of flexibility or mobility of his ankle for the rest of his career, which is really sad to hear. And I've seen footage of that riot against Bilbao where he goes in with a flying knee, and I just thought, yeah, he's got to get off after that, really, hasn't he? But if you move forward to his time at Napoli, obviously he wins the first two Scudettos, sorry, in the first time in a long, long time, I believe. What was it about Naples that Diego took to so much, and why did he integrate into that city so well? As I believe, and it's something that the book portrayed as well, there was a lot of animosity between the north and the south of Italy.
Well, a bunch of things. First of all, Napoli as a city, I don't know if you've been, but it's like Buenos Aires. People celebrate outside. You go to Buenos Aires and there are squares where people have got the music out and some tables and some wine, and they dance tango together. All men with younger women and young couples, and men with men and women with women, and that's Buenos Aires. It's life lived outside, and basically Napoli is like that. Barcelona, I'm from Barcelona, and we see ourselves as a bit of fashionable aristocrat. We just think of ourselves very highly, and really we're just a cosmopolitan city, but very provincial, very, very provincial. In fact, that attitude of thinking ourselves as more than we are is very provincial. And I think Maradona found that there was a little bit of falsehood around the town, and certainly within the club. They just didn't understand what he was about. I mean, I'm telling you about him seeing himself as a brand, even though he didn't call himself that, and certainly seeing himself as the best player in the world and needed to be treated differently. And on top of that club, there was a chairman that actually thought that nobody was bigger than the club, which is a nice way of thinking about it, as long as you respect those stars that actually help you win season ticket holders and commercial deals. He didn't do that. Didn't protect Maradona, didn't see him in a different light. All that meant that Maradona didn't feel loved that much. And fans turned against him because the media and the club were very close, still are. And when they decided that they didn't want Maradona anymore, they turned against him. It was easily done. Very easy to manipulate fans, and also easy to manipulate local media, I feel. When he goes to Napoli, he doesn't find any of that. It's total devotion. And people were, I don't know if you've seen Hand of God, the Sorrentino latest movie. It's fantastic. It's not about Maradona, but it's about Napoli at that time when Maradona arrives. And it tells you everything. For them, it was the arrival of something so special that was going to change their lives. So he celebrated as as a kid being born in the family, or more. So he sensed that from the beginning, when there are 70,000 people in the stadium welcoming him. And of course, he also walks inside the stadium just before coming onto the pitch, and it reminds him of the decrepit old kind of Argentina Juniors stadium as well. So everything was related to a time in which he had been happy, and it was all confirmed to a point of exaggeration. When he lives in the hotel with his family and friends, and he can hardly come out of the hotel, and he's got to escape, and he's got to find people that treat him normally because everybody else feels that treat him like this special being, which became too much at the beginning, at the end. In fact, became too much halfway through it.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't helped by the fact that he looked for artificial help to keep him grounded. And that, of course, created a very confused mind, a very confusing time. But yeah, it was a connection that he sensed from the beginning, and it was confirmed very soon after.
Yeah, you can most certainly tell, especially even today when you see the sort of tribute to him after his death. The scenes in Naples were absolutely beautiful, and even from the clubs themselves, obviously they've renamed the stadium. They've released several kits in tribute to him. Like there's the most recent one where his face is literally on the front of the kit, and I think that relationship between Napoli and Diego is absolutely beautiful. One thing I have to touch on when talking about the book, and it's hard to skip over because it is almost as if it's like the main event of the book, because I think there's 4 chapters dedicated to that game in '86 against England, which is an interesting one because as somebody from Merseyside, I'm sure you've got this as well, obviously from your time on Merseyside, we're not very devoted to the national team. And Diego is still as symbolic today as I always believe, like because there are local fashion brands that have him on the front of t-shirts that people go to town and go clubbing in. So it's really interesting to look back on that game, because I'm very indifferent when it comes to the English national team. And although there were several Everton players on the pitch at that time, because Everton were actually a decent side then, it's an interesting game to look back on. Why did you make that decision for it to be such a substantial part of the book?
First of all, you have to realize that my publishers are Orion. Those are my loyal publishers. I've published always with them first, which means that the only authorized book on Messi, the biography of Messi, is first published in English. The first, the biography I did of, all of them really have been published first in English. Pochettino, Pep Guardiola, Cristiano, etc. So I think of that first, and I'm thinking, I think it'd be interesting to actually go back to that game and go look at it in detail, because there is so many things that I don't know about it. For instance, I forgot that England could have drawn that game. They had that clear chance at the end. And if that had happened, England were on the up. It could have been that in extra time, it could have just be a completely different story. And then what happens? But also, I wanted to, there are football chapters, if you like, in that you get to look closely, almost centimeter by centimeter, what happens in both goals and the reaction of everyone, having spoken to most people that were on the pitch. And then you get to know as well how bad the pitch was, and still he managed to do that. You don't get that through watching it on television. And what was the reaction in England and in Argentina at the same time? And that was also interesting, because it tells you about the country. So there was loads that the more I kept looking into it, I'm thinking, a couple of chapters. Actually, no, let's do another one. It has to be 4. And then, interestingly enough, already it's been translated into like 12 languages. And they keep in it. They keep in the 4 chapters. So obviously it's a game that, I think that there was somebody that actually published a whole book about it. I didn't need to do that much, but certainly I think it deserved the attention. But it's such a iconic game too, that in other languages is also part of a history, and they wanted to know more.
We touched on a little bit earlier just that relationship that Diego had with the city of Naples, and the response to his death by the people of Naples and Napoli as a club. Of course, following his passing from last year, you've ultimately written this book in retrospect of his life. I'd be interested to hear, in comparison to your other biographies that you've authored, how does this book as a whole compare?
Well, already you said something that's important. I started the project 3 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't know what was going to happen to him. I could tell that he wasn't in a good state, but it wasn't because of that I started. It's just that once you do the books I've done, it's like, what next? And it was a suggestion from somebody at Orion. How about Maradona? I thought, actually, he's a massive, massive character, and I don't have to do just people that are working now, but it can be somebody that I can look at the whole career. And my intention was to just write about his time as a player and finish it with the homage that he gets given in 2001 in the Boca Stadium. But then, as he passed away, I needed to do it a little bit more rounded, if you want, the story. And what that means, for starters, is that I wouldn't have to update it 3, 4, 5 times as I've done the Messi one and the others. But certainly it allows you to look back, having the whole picture in front of you. And I still spend most of the time in the book telling about his time as a player, and I discussed this with his daughter, Dalma Maradona. We mixed up in a radio show. And I was saying, I think everything you need to know about Diego, it's all there before 2001. And after that, when he becomes a private citizen, first of all, I'm not that interested. That's his life. It's he did what he did, and obviously becomes a manager, and that goes back into, you have to look into that a little bit. But generally, everything you need to know about Diego it's there before 2001. Then it just gets increased, multiplied by 20 because of his illness, or because of his addiction, and because of other things. But I think it was a good decision from that point of view. I could have just gone into a lot of detail of what has happened to him after 2001, but I was not that bothered. As I say, a lot of it had to do with his private life, and I'm not that interested. There was enough in there, and I think it's 450 pages or something, of his time as a player. Plus, as I say, finishing it all off with his departure. That I didn't have to add anything else.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear, and it is it's a breath of fresh air to hear that you weren't that interested in that private aspect of his life. Once he become, as you say, a private citizen, from a journalistic standpoint, I certainly respect that. Now,
having said that, Max, sorry, when you have to tell the story of the Armando Maradona, especially as a player, you also have to tell the story of Claudia and the people around him, mom and dad, because that explains the collapse, that explains a lot of things that he did. And then looking into Claudia particularly, who was a public figure. She decided to be a public figure, so that is be next to him. That is why it has to be part of the story, of course. And then I realized that, in fact, her story had not been told. And her story is a story of a woman in the 80s next to alpha male people like Diego, and how her dreams were crushed from the beginning. She couldn't be what
she seemed like a woman who had aspirations, like she had a business degree, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
that's right, and she wasn't allowed to do that because Diego was jealous, and all that had to be told. So I dedicate, as I try to do with the main characters, I dedicate a whole chapter to her, and she's throughout the book as well. But I invite, and every time I get interviewed in Argentina, I say this, I invite sociologists and feminists in Argentina to actually have a look at that story. Again, I mentioned it to Dalma Maradona, and she agreed her story has not been told, partly because she doesn't want to say her side of the story, but partly because he hasn't been that much interest. The character, the personality of Maradona devours everything around him. So it's time to give space to that side of the story. And I think I've done a little bit of that, and I hope there's others follow it up, because being a woman in the 80s next to that kind of personality was really tough.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective to have, and I think you've done right to include her into the story. Now, moving on from the book, as of recently, there's been a little bit of news coming out of Barcelona. And before discussing the appointment of Xavi, there's a more fun question. that I'd like to ask you that I regrettably didn't ask you when I previously had the chance. As I mentioned, I fell in love with football watching that 2006 side, the early 2000s side under Frank Rijkaard, Barcelona, who obviously went on to win the Champions League in 2006. I want to ask, as someone that has seen the rise and the fall of each of these sides, out of the Barcelona teams that won the Champions League in 2006, 2011, which I'm going to include over the 2019 because I think they're the better side, and the side in 2015, which of those did you prefer watching and why?
I think the Pep Guardiola one, because it was the confirmation that her brand of football could be successful as well as interesting, because I think through him and through following him and through trying to understand what he was trying to do, we've all grown. We all understand football better.
Yep.
The curiosity has grown into aspects of the game that we never thought of before Pep, I don't think. So that needed to be reinforced by a win, because otherwise it would be like, great talk, great books, but, why has he won? And even though without wins, he would have still changed the game, I feel, but with wins, changes universally. And, it has affected you and so many others. Coaches in England now in the 30s are sons of that way of thinking, adapted to England, of course. So it was a win that went beyond or two wins, if you like, that went beyond the victories. But also it was very pleasing because I was living full-time in England at the time. And the coverage, you should look back. The coverage of that game was like, right, Manchester United have won the championship. So what in history are they now that they are about to win the Champions League? And I said, what? You obviously not watching Barcelona, are you? Because it's a given that Manchester United are going to win, it's like, who are these Barcelona guys anyway? It was like that to the last day, to the day of the game. So it was very pleasing, even though I'm an Espanyol fan, it was very pleasing to see Barcelona winning the Champions League, because we were like, see, I hope you learn from this one. Funnily enough, 2 years later, the coverage was quite similar. Barcelona had been lucky to win before, but now Manchester United are superior. It felt like that. And again, another, not just win, Barcelona destroyed Manchester United to a point where Sir Alex Ferguson had nothing to say at halftime of that game, and he admitted that too. That we should all learn. I think we shouldn't take things for granted, and certainly try to explore rivals of English sides a bit better before we actually come out with the conclusions that the English media came out at the time.
Okay, that's interesting that you raised that. Obviously, I was only quite young at the time, but I will go back and look at the coverage of the two finals because obviously I was sort of glued to watching Barcelona at that time, and I had the feeling that they were going to steamroll Manchester United. And I can remember the 2011 final a lot more distinctly than I can the one in 2009. I remember the goals, that celebration from Messi when he just went absolutely nuts. I remember Eric Abidal lifting the trophy as well after his battle with cancer, which was really inspiring. But a sub question, I guess I propose to you from that is, okay, I had the feeling, of course, out of those three sides, the 2011 side was the most pleasing on the eye and the better footballing side. But out of the attacking trios of each side, so in the 2006 side, you've got Ronaldinho, Eto'o, and Messi. In the 2011 side, you've got Villa, Messi, and Pedro. And then in the 2015 side, Suarez, Neymar, and Messi. Which one of those would you rather have spearheading your side?
Well, as a consequence of what I said, it should be the one of 2011. Villa, Pedro, and Messi. But Luis Suarez, Neymar, and Messi, I don't think we're ever going to see anything like that again. In fact, obviously, Luis Enrique, who may have had an idea what to do with the team, then realizing what he had in his hands and who these three guys were, it was like, forget it. I mean, we have to get the ball to them as quickly as possible. And that changed a little bit the way of attacking of Barcelona, which, by the way, in the context of where we are now, it should have been a progression that should have continued. Instead, we're going backwards now. and Barcelona, they eliminated the essence. Xavi will want to bring it back, but to 2015 or to 2010, we'll have to see what he wants to do. But there was no progression, because what happened at Barcelona at that point is that they picked, in 2015, they picked as a club, as an ideology, as a philosophy, as a methodology, they picked. And it's very difficult when you are at the top to actually challenge yourself, because you just won. So, what is there to challenge? But in fact, that's where we have to look at ourselves the closest and see how we can continue that success. In fact, what they did was like thinking that they managed to get to the top, so that's it. There's nothing to change. In fact, let's renew everybody's contract until for another 30 years, and that didn't work because there was nobody with enough vision at the club to say, actually, guys, no. In fact, I'm getting this wrong. There was people at the club with that vision, but were not heard because everybody was scared of upsetting the status quo and the establishment and the players that had made them win. So they could have built another Messi team around Messi, but with new proposals, new way of thinking about it, new players, but they did not do that, and this is a consequence of it, where we stand now.
That is very true. I agree with everything you said, and I probably would go for MSN, but Eto'o, Messi, Ronaldinho will always hold a special place in my heart, purely because just watching them in my childhood, it was just absolutely phenomenal watching them. Moving forward to the present day, you've almost sort of alluded to that collapse that came as a consequence of that 2015 side, and a key figure in near enough all of those sides that won the Champions League, and the man who lifted the trophy for them in 2015, Xavi Hernandez, of course, has been appointed as Barcelona manager. It feels like things are back on track, and it will be a continuation of that philosophy that started with Rinus Michels, was developed further by Johan Cruyff and Pep Guardiola. Although there's work to be done, it seems like, as I say, things are back on track and all is right with the world. You, of course, were at that contract signing at the Camp Nou. And Xavi seemed to talk a lot about, rather than philosophy, rules and work. How would you explain the situation that Xavi is inheriting from Ronald Koeman, and what would be considered success for Xavi in that short term?
In the short term, to stable the situation, there's no other target really. Top four is what they should do, and it's going to be tough this year, really tough. But even if he doesn't get there, he's got enough credit because of the things you said at the beginning of the question, that is, he's linked to Rinus Michels, when we just don't know yet if he will be the one taking Barcelona into that path. Certainly, football style will be similar to that. But now, to be the leader of a club like Barcelona, the first team of Barcelona, you have to be much more than just the guy that chooses a style. And from that point of view, it was pleasing to hear from Xavi that he realizes that he needs to impose some rules so everybody can grow through a frame that everybody approves and understands. And some values have to be introduced into the side, effort, they have to work harder, they have to train harder, they have to change the dynamic, and they have to recreate a club culture that has been abandoned. That's it, has been abandoned. In the last few managers, especially the last two, just one didn't have enough authority to change anything in Quique Setién, and Koeman just, it's not his thing. He was very useful in a time of transition to actually get the team to play and some youngsters to come into the first side, etc. But he's not one to create a club culture. He's not one to create or to define a style. That's not for him. So Xavi's going to come in a bit of a desert in many, many aspects. And to change that, to get the team, the players not to get injured, not to get muscle injuries, to finish or to be as intense as they should be in the pressure, and to do a lot of things without the ball, all that is going to require time. And Xavi is going to be given time. And he's going to be given time for something that I've got mixed feelings about. On one hand, I understand why he's in charge and he wants it. And at this point, he's a legend and he has already experience managing. So that's great. He now has got the opportunity. But on the other, I keep hearing from very important people at the club and outside the club that there was the only really option. Xavi Hernandez was the only option. And how could that be? If you're a club that has grown through multiple influences, from Holland to south of Spain, to Hungary, to Yugoslavia, to so much, how is it that just one person can manage the first team? So it feels to me that there is too much fundamentalism around the idea of how Barcelona should play. And that means that you become much smaller than you were. I think it should be many other people that should have been considered, from, I don't know, Emmanuel Alguacil to Julian Lopetegui. Yes, Laporta tried to get Nagelsmann and German managers. Why not? But the entourage wasn't happy about that. So I just think that if Cruyff was alive, he wouldn't be Cruyff enough for many people and wouldn't be considered for the job because he's not Cruyff enough. You know what I mean? It's like, it feels to me completely wrong, that way of thinking of Barcelona. I hope that Xavi gives them stability, but also I think they have to look into themselves and see that Barcelona is a much bigger club than they're making it to be now.
Is it just a matter of that longing for the return to that culture that they were oh so famous for years ago? You touched on it there, and God, I know more than most that isn't Ronald Koeman's specialty. Like, he was meant to be the man that was at the helm of the project of Everton Football Club, and look at where we are now. Like, his methods really can lead to a disenfranchised fan base, to a fan base to lose interest. And I think, you know, what Barcelona have almost turned into can be epitomized by that game against Celta just gone. I watched that game and I really thought, you know, 3-0 at half time. You know, the news of Xavi has certainly given them a lift, but as the second half played out, there certainly are things that need to be fixed. As you mentioned, I think they've got injuries in the double figures, which is absolutely crazy. But almost to play devil's advocate a little bit, all the things that you mentioned about Xavi, he's a legend. He's achieved so much. He is a continuation of the philosophy set by Cruyff, obviously a student of Guardiola. So is Ronald Koeman, if you know what I mean. Like, he is obviously a student of Cruyff. Actually, he scored that famous goal in '92, which won them the first European Cup. And from all accounts of what I've seen as a player, was one of the best defenders to play the game, similar to Xavi being one of the best midfielders to play the game. Do you think the fact that Xavi lives more in recent memory and his more explicit ties to Guardiola makes him immune from the same sort of treatment that Ronald Koeman received?
Ronald Koeman was the least Cruyffist of all the people that played under him. I mean, you can tell by the fact that 4-3-3 wasn't. 4-3-3 is not a religion, it's not an obligation, but it's a way of playing and a way of understanding the game. And he just didn't go for it. 4-2-3-1 was more his thing. And Luke de Jong being signed and you know, Barcelona being the second team this season and putting more crosses into the box after Osasuna tells you everything you need to know about Ronald Koeman. So he wasn't very Cruyff-like. And certainly, yes, being a legend will help Xavi a lot. It's just that you all think that Barcelona, I mean, people of your generation and younger, Barcelona started with Ronaldinho. Barcelona went through long periods of no success. And from Ronaldinho to now, it's an island in the ocean. But the ocean is massive. And looking at the bigger picture, you should consider other times and see how they come out of other times to actually reproduce it now a little bit. And that's what I'm going back to, this idea that they made Barcelona so small, because, you know, Van Gaal was part of that project as well, of that line. Yeah. Johan Cruyff left nothing written, and Van Gaal made sure that it was all written. And it was this idea of developing the teams, you know, from under 7s, under 8s to the first team, and players going through the ranks, etc. And the way of doing that, he put that in writing. And you wouldn't say that he's a Cruyff man. So Bobby Robson added something. Not sure exactly what, but I'm sure he did. And Valverde also. Everybody added things. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to, in context, in hindsight, to actually look back and say, but there's a line. There was always a line. No, there wasn't never a line. It was just up and downs, and that's what makes a club. It's just that, as I say now, Xavi fits in because he's a legend, but because the reading of the past starts with a little bit with Johan Cruyff and is very selective reading of what Barcelona has been about. I think Barcelona is much more than that. I'm not saying, because now the division, you won't sense this because you don't get it in international media, but the division in Barcelona is the Cruyff and anti-Cruyff. So, you with Xavi, or the other proposal that you are doing is to be a physical team and become like the Chelsea of Mourinho. And it's not that extreme, but you can add physicality to the team if you want to do intensive pressure, if you want to beat the 50-50s, if you want to match Bayern Munich. There's a lot of things that you have to put in. But the fundamentalists will tell you, no, short midfielders that pass the ball and keep the ball. Well, let's move on from that idea, because I think that takes you to the past, and the future is based on that essence, but with its additions too in their style of football.
One of the things that was really poignant to me, especially with the appointments of Xavi, I was discussing this with a good mate of mine who also follows Barcelona, and he said it's a worrying sign when the manager is a better player than half of the actual players. But on the other hand, I said, I can see the development of players such as Pedri, Gavi, De Jong, like all these younger players, those short midfielders that you mentioned, I can see they're developing almost, speeding up tenfold. Do you think there's a possibility?
Would that be enough? Would that be enough? That's the question. Would that be enough? And we don't have the answer, but would that be enough? I mean, I don't know. It just feels like, all that is fine, and it's good to have a Pedri and a Gavi and a Nico. Nico is fantastic, and Frankie de Jong. And is that enough? Is that enough to hold a team to play at the tempo that football has been played now, with the intensity that is played now? Look what Pep Guardiola is. He has evolved.
Yeah,
he has evolved to quicker transitions and the value of that, to a different type of midfielders and the value of that. So let's not go back to 2010, and let's see if Xavi can bring Barcelona to 2021, 2022.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And I saw a little clip of the Manchester City team of 17-18, I believe it was, who finished the league with over 100 points. And you can certainly see an evolution from the tiki-taka style of football. Now, talking of transitions, Guillem, I want to move on now and focus more on your story, if you don't mind, because when we last spoke, I believe it was the session with the great Mark Chapman in Manchester, where you'd mentioned to me that the first place that you ever lived in the UK was not too far from where I am now, in Liverpool. I would be absolutely fascinated to hear about your journey of how you found the change in culture, how you found the city, and I think more than anything, how you cope with the accent.
The accent that basically, when I arrived to Liverpool in 1991, I thought I spoke a bit of English, having done a year and a half in a private school, but had no English really. I remember the drive from the airport with Archie and Alistair, the family part of the family that I moved into, and I couldn't understand a word they were saying. And Archie was Scottish, and Alistair doesn't have a really strong accent, so it wasn't so much the accent. But I thought, it's good. This is going to be hard. And there's no Spanish people around, no journalists around, nothing. So I had to just create my own path, really. And I immerse myself in it. To do that, you have to have the right genes and mentality and education. My parents are immigrants, both of them. Came to Barcelona very young in their lives, and immigration hasn't been, a dirty word, if you like, or something that is really hard to do, or something that you have to be fearful of. No, it's just part of life. It happens, and you grow through it. In fact, everybody should be abroad at some point in their lives. And then I sensed a little bit of a close community in Liverpool. They helped me. I didn't have a lot of money, had no money. And, Archie will cook something and will share it with me, or I'll spend, 7 hours with a pint of lager in a pub in Liverpool, and the butcher will bring me a steak, and the baker will bring me a bit of bread, and somebody will do some soup, and I'll have the soup. So, and I was looked after by Liverpool big time, and I'll never, ever forget that, and the people that held me. And as I was learning English, the accent became part of my own English. So, I never ever, not one single time in that period thought, this is too hard, I have to go back. And I met many people that went through that and went back. So no, I don't have a picture of what my life has to be in the future. So I just went through it, as I said, with a lot of help, with a lot of hours, putting hours into the day to do what I wanted to do, which was, to be the best journalist I could be. Not a football journalist, not a sports journalist, just a journalist. That was the original idea, and then football came to me. And I remember that time really, really, really fondly. I love Liverpool. I love people from Liverpool, and I know that give me a day in Liverpool and my accent comes back as well, which is quite funny. I imagine a Spanish guy speaking with a bit of a Scouse accent.
You mentioned there, and this is me just recalling from memory from a couple of years ago when we did spoke. I think I remember you saying it wasn't a football journalist at all. Was it like an entertainment journalist that you initially came over as?
Well, I came over as having just finished university. I just finished university. That I didn't have a job, so I worked in a pub, and I did many things. And one of the early writings that I did was for a magazine called In Touch, which was a little bit of, I did cinema reviews. So 10 o'clock in the morning, I would be able to go and see the, whatever new movies that were coming in. And once a week, I would write something on them in English. For the Spanish media, I offered myself everywhere. And I started doing cultural reports on exhibitions or whatever was going on. And the first paid jobs had to do with tabloid journalism. So I was writing for a magazine called Lecturas, which is like a tabloid magazine, similar to Hello, but further down in the social scale, if you like. And I wrote a lot about Lady Di, as we call her, and about Prince Charles and Camilla and all that. Did about 60 pages on the death of Diana, and about 70 pages on the funeral. And that was a period in which I survived thanks to that. And I didn't have to do a lot, really, just follow the stories that were being published and just send some stuff back. And then it was in '96, coinciding with the European Championships, very famous Spanish radio show came to London. They sometimes move around to do the shows, and I went to see it, a suggestion of my brother. And there was the editor of a magazine called Don Balón, nothing to do with the Don Balón that's out there now. It closed down. But at the time, a very prestigious magazine. I offered myself as a correspondent. And that was 96. And a year later, Sky had started doing Spanish football. And I rang them to say, look, I'm a Spanish journalist. I like to see what you do, and I like to write about it. And they invited me to the studio. They put me in front of the camera. They said, right, you're the guest of the show today. I had no idea this was coming. And just a half time, they said, we're going to start doing a highlight show. Do you want to do it? I was like, yeah, I'll do it. You've done this before? Oh, thousands of times. And of course, that day was my debut on television. And then the rest is history. Once you are on television, a lot of things happen to you.
That's really interesting, and most definitely something that I do want to ask you about. But before that, I want to ask you, you sort of phrased it as football found you. Obviously, you went over sort of reviewing films. Was the passion for football always there?
Do you know what? I wouldn't say my passion is football. I wouldn't say I'm passionate about football. And I wouldn't say it's my biggest passion either. It never was, even though I think partly down to I'm an Espanyol season ticket holder. And we lost the UEFA Cup final in '88, and that was so hard to take. It was home and away, 3-0 home. It was like a given, halftime 0-0. And then we conceded 3 goals, lose an extra time. And for 4 years, I didn't want anything to do with football, disappear from my life. But it's not like my life has been around football at all, my private life, my personal life. It's just that given, I was offering myself to different magazines and newspapers, and one of them was Don Balon, and then Skype happened. And then once you're there, you obviously take advantage of it. But my passion is tell stories. My passion is to convert what I hear, what I see into storytelling. That's really what I'm about. Including, as you know, I'm the chairman of a football club and Biggleswade United. And my passion is not the Saturday game or the Sunday game with the ladies, Saturday with the men, Saturday, Sunday with the ladies, or Saturday, Sunday morning with you. That's not my passion. My passion is to put together an idea and to get people on board and to actually push together to convert it into something practical and real, and to share their experiences and to feed from their energy. That's what I'm passionate about. And football for me is a succession of storytelling, and that's why there are the books there. I thought I had one in me, but then I don't know, I lost count now. And with CBS, the number one network in America, I started doing live links, and now last year we did a documentary because they saw that as well in me, that I can tell stories. And now we're doing another documentary. So yeah, the result, not my passion, is something else for me.
Okay, that love for storytelling and narrative is certainly something that resonates with me. And apart from the athletic side of sports, which is something that I have a massive appreciation for and I am very passionate about, I've always viewed sports as a cornerstone of culture, and the greatest unscripted drama that there is. Before concluding on your position at Biggleswade United, I wanted to talk about a bit of a selfish question, I guess. That transition for you from print journalism to broadcast media, being in front of the camera, like I'm sure that was a huge shock to turn up and just be put in front of the camera. And it does take some acclimatizing to, at least I would say so, as more of an introvert, I think I am. I think it definitely requires a different skill set than print journalism. How did you find that transition now, as you have such a broad portfolio of different ranges of work?
Again, if you recognize that your talent is to tell stories, it doesn't matter the format. I've done songs as well, and that was you have to learn the as you say, or apply a different skills set. But really, the essence is the same. You're telling a story in 3 minutes, or in a podcast in 45 minutes, or in a documentary in an hour and a half, or in a live link in 4 minutes or 2 minutes even. It's just to make it more succinct and to realize what's important to say at that point. Which, because I've got this fear of being found out, which now I'm learning. It drives so many people in the world. I did a masterclass last week with Kate Abdo, of the presenter, wonderful presenter, and Pete Radovich, who's our executive producer on CBS, 40-time Emmy winner, right? And they both have got it as well. So when that happens, you're over-prepared, and the difficulty there is to actually reduce it all to 2 minutes or 3 minutes or even an hour and a half. So you have to learn to do that. But I quite clearly have got the immigrant DNA of surviving in hospital kind of places, and then when it was about I sent a fax. I remember sending a fax to the newspapers in England to see if anybody required the kind of things that I could offer. Nobody answered. But I thought, okay, well, there must be another way in which I can let them know that I exist. And then I started thinking, social media, webpage, podcast, YouTube, and then I did it. Some of them I keep up more than others, but quite clearly, I was quite amused when I heard maybe 10 years ago written journalists in England saying, do my article and let's video, that's for somebody else. And I'm thinking, you're going to be left behind. So now everybody does video on it. So because I had this need to survive, of the freelancer, if you like, even though I've been under contract for many years now, but still sense that thing of, number one, surviving. Number two, what's new out there? What can I do? Or how can I tell the story in different ways? That means that I don't see it as a big jump from one to the other. And I understand a bit about being shy. I don't think I'm the most, what's the opposite of shy?
Extrovert.
Extrovert. I'm not the biggest extrovert out there. So I have to put a face on, and I have to tell you a little secret. I mean, my family friends, the closest friends, don't call me Guillem. They call me Guillermo, which is how my parents baptized me as. But Guillem is the public figure. And as such, you kind of push the public figure out there, doing the public figure thing. But it's not me. The real me is Guillermo, who then will go out with the friends or whatever. So that has also helped me to create these two different perspectives to survive in terms of not being a little bit shy like you are yourself.
Yeah, that's really, it's inspiring to hear, I would say, because certainly I remember saying to you that it's certainly one of the things I really do respect about you is that work ethic and the ability to get out there and do so much. And it certainly gives people like me hope moving forward in my career. Like, fingers crossed, if I achieve, a fraction of what you've managed to achieve, I'd be very proud. But I don't want to take up too much more of your time, Guillem. And I know I want to conclude on this because more of a long-term ambition in my career, but an ambition nonetheless in my career is obviously because I've had this education in sports business. I'm really fascinated by the executive side of the game and the decision-making process that goes on. And for you to be chairman of a county league side in Biggleswade United, again, something else that is really inspiring. Someone from the media side of the game has crossed over to the executive side. And obviously, like you alluded to a little bit there, that aspect of narrative storytelling, the ability to communicate and have people skills is obviously really important and will go a long way in that role. But what other aspects of your skill set or your personality, if you like, have helped you in your role as chairman?
You need a lot of energy to do this. I would say, Max, get involved as soon as possible, because you learn a lot about your profession, first of all. Secondly, clubs like ours need people like you to keep going. And you can add, you can use 1% of your time with it. I know it will grow, but if you want to be in both sides, you must know that it requires a lot of time, a lot of energy. I couldn't do it without, I've got a team of people that help me with things I do, administration, research, the books and so on. I've got them all involved at the club. I've got one particular person, William, next to me, who is like me at the club. So he has to be present, and he has to do a lot of things that I cannot do myself, but I want them done. So you need to delegate. Obviously, that is another asset that not everybody is able to have. And I'm happy to delegate. I want people to grow and get it wrong and right and wrong, and I'll be there for when they fall down and then lift them, and then because I need them, of course, but also because it's a way for them to grow too. I understand more than ever that things move very slowly. I want things done now, but it doesn't work like that at a football club. You have to convince people. So I've learned a lot through studying very closely Pochettino for the book and his leadership skills to actually apply them here. things that I've learned through countless conversations with people, also try to apply it here. I know that the role of chairman is a role that is particular and it requires a certain, quite a big area of influence, but doesn't have to be everywhere. That's hard when you want to have your hands on things. So those are partly intuition, but intuition is just an accumulation of experiences. And then you also realize when you go one way and you get it wrong, you have to come back and go another way. So also I get it wrong. I had an idea of what we had to do when we first arrived, and that idea has evolved. There are limitations in terms of facilities in a country like England. That's amazing, but that's the case. And there are limitations on how you can influence players. I wanted them to train 4 times a week from 1. Well, we managed to get 2, and I should be happy with that. So that as long as you also have that mentality of being flexible and adapting to the circumstances, which again is my immigrant DNA, I think, that helps you. But as I said, for you and whoever's listening to this and want to get involved with football clubs, do it now. Don't leave it for tomorrow, because it will take you time now and in the future. But the sooner you do it, the better, because then you'll be able to see how much it gives you and how rewarding it is.
Okay, note certainly taken, and I'll listen back to this podcast in 15, 20 years time, and I'll be sure to drop you a text to say what you've said worked. And just to conclude, as I say, I didn't want to take up too much of your time. In terms of marketing and PR, I'm sure the Wall of Fame has worked wonders. Is that Jamie Carragher I can see over your shoulder there?
That's Jamie Carragher there. I mean, you reckon so many of them. Kate Abdo is there. That's Maradona over there. Thierry Henry and Harry Kane. Let's see. Xabi Alonso, Pep Guardiola, Xavi Hernandez over there. Rakitic, Puyol, Raúl, Kun Agüero. Oof, there's so many.
Legend.
That's and there's about 7. I cannot put up because there's no more space. So yeah, it's that, and of course we are now doing Dave Nash. You know, the number 1 graffiti artist in the UK. He's outside in the pitch, just doing 2 murals. One of Emma Hayes, which we just learned today is the first one ever, and she's so proud of it. See if I can invite her over to see it, and then one of Marcus Rashford. And to me, they are 2 role models for everyone, not just for football, but certainly for us. It'd be good to get into the pitch and see them both and what they represent, and learn from it too.
Most definitely. Biggleswade United most definitely seemed like a progressive club, and a club that will be going places in the future. Listen, Guillem, I don't want to keep you for any longer. I'm very grateful for you to taking the time out of your day to speak to me today. This most certainly has been one of the most favourite podcasts that I've done out of the selection that I've done so far, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. You're more than welcome to come onto the podcast in the future. And as I say, take care.
Thank you, Max, and keep it going. I've seen that you get into the hundreds now of podcast shoots, so
we'll get there.
So yeah, keep going. You're doing a good job. Thank you.
Thanks, man.